All right, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another day of SaberSim's DFS office hours. It is Wednesday, November 22nd of 2023 here. This is our last show of the week. We will not have office hours Thursday and Friday of this week due to the holidays. We will be back next Monday. So if you guys have any questions ahead of this little long break here, today is the day to get those questions in. But for those of you who do not know me, my name is Andrew. I'm one of the coaches over here at SaberSim. This is a show where we go over how to use the SaberSim app, answer any and all DFS related questions. You get your questions in one of three ways here. First off, send us an email, support@sabersim.com. Second way, post it live in the YouTube chat. Third way, post it in the office hours channel in our Discord server. If you're not in our Discord and want to get access to that channel, there's a link in the description of this video. You get access to our similar channels, individual sport channels, and you get access to the rest of the SaberSim team here. There's plenty of people on the SaberSim team in the Discord helping people get better each and every day. Looking ahead to today, we have a 14-game NBA slate and a 14-game NHL slate. So going to be a very busy Wednesday here. We obviously have football Thursday. We have football Friday. We have college football Saturday, I believe. And then we have NFL main slate on Sunday. So like an action-packed weekend. If you guys are not signed up with us and want to check us out, we have a 5-day no strings attached free trial. The link to that is also in the description of this video. Sign up with us today. Use us here through Monday and get a ton of DFS action in and see what we are all about. But before we get started, as always, I want to remind you guys about our weekly max challenge here. It's a promotion / giveaway we do during the NFL season here. Get access to weekly prizes, season-long prizes. Use this sign-up link to screen, enter the challenge button to get signed up. The link to this page is in the description. And then just follow our eligibility requirements and you will be all set here. And then we also have a max challenge for Owner's Box as well. So get in on the action over on Owner's Box. But looking at questions today, we're going to start with questions in the Discord as always here, and we will just work through them until we run out of questions. CG says, hey, what is going on, my man CG? All right. Looks like our first question here came in from Ghost, so we'll start there. And question says, when going to old slates and attempting to build lineups, what information is being used to build these lineups? Extra information to what we had pregame or the same information as prior to lock? What I'm trying to ask is this an accurate way to practice building, or is SaberScore in this scenario using information that it did not have pregame, therefore giving us lineups that are good compared to normal? Great question. So yeah, so when you go back to an old slate, it's going to have all of the simulations that ran throughout the night. So if you're looking at an NBA slate, you know, there's certain information that you have about injuries and news pre-slate, and then there's information that you gain throughout the slate as the slate goes on. So basically, when you go back to any old build, you are running builds as if you had all the information about all of the games. So those builds are usually always going to be more accurate because they have all of that updated information. So I really wouldn't do that if you're looking to review your process or anything like that. What I would instead do is go back to Contest Flashback and spend your time there. We've been talking about this a lot here. We do weekly review shows over on the YouTube channel using Contest Flashback. You can find all 13 videos in reviewing past slates with the Contest Flashback. We have NBA, NHL, and NFL here. And then we also have a tutorial about how it works in our help documentation. And then go down here, how to use Contest Flashback under tutorials. So check those resources out. But yes, if you're going back to any slate, I would go back. I would go to the contest tab, make sure you're on the right date. Go pick the contest that you played, right? Maybe you played the 4-point play. So you go to the 4-point play, pop out this players tab. Go find yourself in this users list. Hey, how did I do? What was my sim ROI? You can sort by maxers, right? Maybe I just want to look at people who maxed out the contest. So I'm going to look at people who entered 20 lineups, which is the max, right? And then see how those players did. And you can look at some of the top players from here and go and try and have takeaways about what they did, what you didn't do, why their sim ROI was higher, what the differences were, and then use that information. So that's really what these videos are here, are basically showing you how to do that. So we have an NBA one that Max and I did, and then I did an NHL one with Scott, and then we have a bunch of NFL ones here. So check those out, but I think that's a much better use of your time in general. All right. Bill's Nut said, what is a good way to build for a 14-game NBA slate? Or are there so many players that it is difficult to take stands and / or get the right plays? Should ownership be considered in any way? Yeah, I think ownership should always be considered, right? And ownership is already being considered for you automatically, either through SaberScore or through contest sims, depending on what you are using, right? So we always think ownership is important. The biggest thing on a 14-game slate is to make sure you catch all the news. Like, there are so many games, all these different windows. Like, the more news you can react to, the better projections you're going to be building your lineups with, which is like getting back to that first question here. So I always recommend using this resource here, the basketball news dashboard over on basketballmonster.com. So check this out, basketballmonster.com, go over to news, and then you're going to see all the news for the slate, right? So like a ton of late breaking news looks like it's going to be, right? So it does Devin Booker play? Does Anthony Davis and LeBron James play, right? There's some other, interesting pieces here, but like, does Jason Tatum play, right? Like, you want to have this information. So basically, one thing that I've done in the past here is that if there is a lot of news late in the slate that can be very impactful, what I will do is make sure to limit my exposure to the early games to make sure I'm able to take advantage of that late news by having enough lineup positions available, by having enough salary available to take advantage of that news. So for me, that you can do that a couple different ways, right? You can literally come into the teams that start at lock and then like limit your player pool. Like, hey, from the games that start at lock, I only want to allow these 3 players into my lineup from this team, right? So maybe I uncheck these guys. I just go, you know what? I'm only okay playing Jokic, Gordon, and Porter because they're all over a 5 value, and then they're all over 30 plus fantasy points. And then, I do the same for Orlando, same for Washington, same for Charlotte. Or you could do like a rule, right? Where you make sure that, hey, every lineup, you can do like a group rule where you say like, use at least, we'll say 3 players, and then we'll go by game here. And then I will save this as a manual rule. So then I can save it, right? And then I could just basically delete all these lineups, all these. I'm basically just going to save the Lakers, right? This is like kind of a tedious way to do it. I might do it a little bit differently. But like basically, hey, use at least 3 players from these late games. It doesn't matter what game it is. The point is that you're saving salary and positions for future late swaps, right? So you can do it this way where you go in and X all the teams, or what you could do is a manual group rule where you just come in and say, hey, use at least 3, go to like Lakers and Dallas, just like check in these guys into your rule. All you're doing is just using these as like a placeholder. Like, you don't really want to play them, but you're just saying like, hey, I'm guaranteeing that I'm using so many of these guys. That way I'm keeping a lineup positions and salary available. And then when that news breaks, I could turn this rule off, and then I could just rebuild the rest of my lineup with that updated news, or the news that I was waiting for, right? When that value opens up, turn off the rule and then just rebuild your lineups. So really on a 14-game slate, it's super important to take advantage of news and then also to plan to take advantage of news. So those are my tips for a 14-game slate. All right. Next question here from Gatekeeper. Question says, if I build 50 lineups and I added them to 100 entries, they'd be duped. After the first game, when I go to late swap, would I be able to expand these lineups to 100? Great question. And the answer, as far as I know, is no. So what SaberSim does, it looks at your lineup file and it determines how many unique lineups you have. So if there are only 50 unique lineups, it's only going to rebuild those 50 unique lineups. So that is what would happen in this case. If you had 100 entries in one contest, that would happen. If you had 100 entries across multiple contests, then you could late swap each contest individually. So like, say I have 2 contests with 50 entries each, and you duped across the contest. Well, if you late swap them one by one, then yes, you could get to 100 different lineups. So that is an exception to what I previously said, but it sounded like they were all in a single contest. So just know that difference between one contest versus multiple. All right, question from Parker. Parker said, not really sure where to put this, but seeing other optimizers throwing Black Friday sales, just curious if SaberSim is joining in, or was it just the 1 year discount that was available? Great question. Yes, we are going to have Black Friday discount / sales here. I am not going to spill the beans on what those might be just yet, but be on the lookout. We will definitely make sure you know about those sales. So don't think you're going to miss it. We will hit you up many different ways to make sure that you are able to see those deals and take advantage of them. All right. Next question here from Jimmy. And Jimmy said, I tend to get a very high amount of ownership on players when doing my lineups, even with mini uniques. Do you ever recommend setting a cap on ownership prior to the build? Great question. So the way that I recommend this is to go through this in like a 2-step process. So what I would do is run my lineups, right? And then first thing I'm going to do is apply my mini uniques. At that point, if there are still individual players that are just too high exposure for you, set the max exposures to those players only. And the reason I like doing that is because you go from setting a lot of max exposures to like less than 5. Usually mini uniques will get you like 90% of the way there. But then what you need to do is just come in and then clean up those like last, 5 players. And I don't like to set the global because player ownerships change, right? Players come in at different ownership levels all the time. So it just really depends what somebody's ownership is, whether or not, if somebody's 70% owned, well then, hey, 75% owned exposure is not really that much in terms of relation to the field. But if somebody is 2% owned and you get them at 75%, well, now, that leverage gets pretty up there, right? So that's the reason I don't like setting global max exposures. So I would rather handle it this way. So let's say, I'm building these 20 lineups here, and then I'm going to apply my mini uniques. Maybe I can get to like 6 or something like that. So let's say it's 6, I'm pretty happy with everything except for these 2. Gafford at 60%, Miles Bridges at 45%. I'm just not really loving those. So then I would just come in here and set those 2 exposures. Maybe I put Gafford down to 50. Maybe I put Bridges down to 40 here. And then I'm on my way. So I think that, doing these fine-tune max exposure adjustments are perfectly fine. And that's the way I prefer to handle them. You could always do it the way you suggested, where you right-click on max exposure, go to the right side, use the global max exposure option. That is definitely a tool at your disposal. If you know for sure, no matter what, I do not want to play any player in more than, X percentage of my lineups, then, have at it, use the global max exposure. Totally okay. All right. Next question. Simple Chef said, can you explain how to digest contest rewind when looking at sim ROI versus actual ROI and how to adjust for future reference? Yeah, sure. Of course. So really, we try not to care about actual ROI. I know that may sound silly, but basically the goal here is that if you can create a long-term winning process where over and over you are positively grading out in contest flashback with positive sim ROI, that means that it is only a matter of time before you start to realize that ROI. So if I were to go to users for yesterday's slate, normally what I do is sort by entries. Okay, I'm just going to look at like maxers, right? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and then look at the highest sim ROIs, right? So then what I could do here is I could do a couple of things. I could look at these individual portfolios. So like, I don't really care that, Jesse James here, their actual ROI was negative 62%. It looks like they built a solid portfolio of lineups, right? They had a 274.19% sim ROI. So that means across our 100,000 simulations we ran of this contest with the actual lineups in the contest and how it could play out, on average, this person went from $80 to almost 3xing their money, right? So 3x is about 240, so 300% here. So they built a solid set of lineups. At the end of the day, the slate only gets played out one time. So it's super high variance how that can play out. You just never really know what's going to end up happening. So that's why we like to use Sim ROI, because it's basically saying, hey, if you were to play this slate out over and over and over again, your lineups did very well. So you should feel very comfortable putting in those lineups over and over and over again if you have this process that leads you to this set of lineups and is very consistent, right? So the example I like to use is that if you're familiar with poker, 2-7 is the worst hand you can have, right? That on average, long term, 2-7 is going to lose more money than it's going to win. That does not mean it is never going to win money. It will sometimes win. So what a lot of recreational gamblers do is, they'll fold it because they know it's a bad hand, and then the flop will come, the cards will come, X7-7, and they get 3 of a kind, and then now they're mad, right? And then now they're like, oh, I should have played it. It's like, no, you shouldn't play it actually ever, because long term it's going to lose money. You can't know when the times are you're going to win. So you just have to take this long-term mindset of, I know that this hand is bad and I should fold it. And that's what you're trying to do here. You're trying to create a process that is a long-term winning process. And you need to approach DFS with the mindset that, like, I know these lineups are good and I'm going to keep putting them in. And then I am going to start seeing the actual ROIs come in eventually here. And like, hopefully sooner rather than later, you start to realize that ROI, but we're coming at it from this theoretical perspective. And that is what you want to use to grade out your process to be objective in what kind of quality of lineups you're putting into a contest. Good question. And then follow-up was, what would be a positive ROI on a consistent basis? 20%, 40%. I see ranges all the way into the 200s. Yeah, it's going to depend on a couple things, right? It's going to depend on how many entries you have in the contest. So, like, the less entries you have, the higher your sim ROI is generally, how top-heavy the contest is. So I wouldn't like try and come up with this blanket number. I would just like go into a contest, start at the top, and then see what the highest sim ROIs are, and then see how far down you are like in that standing, and then take it on a contest by contest basis. So that's my opinion there. All right, jumping over to the YouTube chat. Question from Noah. Noah said, hey, Andrew, I have seen other Sabres team members talk about risk-adjusted ROI for basketball instead of just ROI as the 20th best lineup in the ROI lineup, similar to the risk-adjusted ROI one. Good question. If you're looking for a refresher on risk-adjusted ROI versus ROI, go over to our help docs, go to frequently asked questions, and then just type in ROI. And then we have this great video, what do risk-adjusted ROI and ROI mean? So I'll drop that here for anybody looking for that refresher. But yeah, I agree that, risk-adjusted ROI is the preferred sorting metric. And the reason for that is when you run a contest sim, you get ROI, cash rate, win rate, ROI standard deviation, dupes. You get those 5 metrics directly from the contest sim. What risk-adjusted ROI does is it looks at those other 5 metrics and then gives the lineup a score, a risk-adjusted ROI score. So that is taking in all that information, digesting it, and then returning you with a new value to sort by. So that is why I think risk-adjusted ROI is the best. It takes into account not only the ROI, but the risk, the variance of the lineup as well. All right, CG said, do you resim/rebuild before each new set of games, 738, 839, and so on? Yeah, I think, well, it depends, right? So for NBA, lineups don't come out until at least 30 minutes to lock, and that's on a good day, right? A lot of teams are releasing their starting 5 to 10 minutes before lock, because there's no penalty from the NBA about that. So what I like to do is keep the Discord up and then look at the NBA lineup alert channel, and then I can see when simulations run. And then we actually have this thing an hour prior to lock, through lock, where if a simulation runs and a player's projection moves by plus or minus 2%, we will summarize that information for you when the sim completes. So you're going to get a sim started notification. You're going to get a sim completed notification. If we see that somebody got ruled out, then we're going to, take those players' fantasy points away and then redistribute it to the rest of the team. You're going to see that information summarized in the Discord. So I would definitely be keeping your eye on that channel throughout the night. All right, Ryan said, can you explain how to digest? Okay, we just answered that. And then Yang said, how do the lineups I enter into different contests random? Sometimes it feels like the lineups I'm entering into each contest are similar to each other, even though my lineups are diverse. Yeah, so we have a couple different sorting methods here. I don't have an entries file at the moment to like break this down for you guys. But if you're looking for a breakdown of what our different fill methods are, rank, unique random, exact, check out this tutorial here. It's a quick video that'll explain those to you. So I'm going to drop that here in the chat. But I personally prefer to use unique random. I'm okay with, wherever the lineups fall. I'm not that, specific about it, mostly because I'm MMEing. I'm building a lot of lineups, and, I'm not managing like a handful of lineups. So I don't care too much about how that works, but some people do, right? So that's why we have those other options, unique rank, where you can know that, hey, your top lineup is going into your top contest, your second best lineup is going into your second contest. You can reorder those contests as you see fit. So check out this tutorial here for more information on that. Another question. Yang said, regarding this question, what confidence level do you have that positive sim ROI over time equals plus EV for the user? I asked this question because I see really elite players with low/negative sim ROIs. This makes me question the accuracy of this sim ROI number. Yeah, I mean, I haven't particularly seen this. We do a review show each and every week, and we see top players coming in with very high sim ROIs regularly, right? So like Max and I just did our week 11 show, and the top sim ROI player for like the high stakes was Whistles Go Woo. Like big surprise there, right? We see top players coming in with high positive sim ROIs all the time. So like if I were to go look at the fadeaway for tonight, right? Or I'm sorry, for yesterday, and then I go to users, and then I sort by 150 maxers, and then I go to sim ROIs. These are all pros, like Papa Gates, Garns, Elusive Smoke, Shady. They're SaberSim guys. Skyhook, Kurt, Mazwa, Hacksaw, Scout, Chipotle, Hishbu, like all these guys are, very high, E. Hafner, like Fantasy Cruncher guy, 1-800-Eddie, Stochastic guy, Wiley, RPS, JBC, RPS, like, Tinderella, right? Raging Phillip, Chetabisk, Buck Lovin, all these guys, positive sim ROIs and maxing out these contests. So like, I haven't really seen that. Petty comes in here as well, right? Brick, Nerdy, if you're familiar with DFS, you're familiar with like all of these names. So I haven't really seen like that exactly here. There is going to be some bias based on the projections. That's for sure. Right. So if you're using, Saber, like in our contests, in our post contest sim, we are using the SaberSim projections and our simulations, right? If you're using Stochastic, you're probably going to grade out better using their post contest sim. So like there's a little bit of bias in the projection source that you're using. But ultimately, I've mostly seen winning players grading out well overall, even in our contest sim. All right. Indra said, if I'm making a 20 max and I set my projections and then run my contest sim, what should I pick my lineups based on? I've heard sim ROI. Yeah, I would definitely use the risk-adjusted ROI sorting method. That is our preferred method, and we've talked about it a little bit here. So stick with risk-adjusted ROI. It's going to be your best friend. CG said, last question, if I load custom projections, how does that affect the output of lineups? Are the lineups still being created with simulations? Great question. So when you use custom projections, what we do is we adjust all the players' projections, right? So you're going to upload them. You're going to see those projections updated in the My Projection column. Let's say that, you upload projections and your projections have Joel Embiid go from 62 points to 68 points, right? So what's going to happen is that when you pull up his distribution, every time he gets 60 points, he now gets 65. Every time he gets 40, he gets 45. Every time he gets 80, he gets 85. So we keep the shape of the distribution. We just shift it over. So the new mean is what you set it at. So you get our distribution, you get your custom projection mean on top of it, and you get to use both of those things in tandem here. All right. Follow up here. Simple Chef. This is posted in bold, so perfect. So when building lineups, how to analyze your lineup sim ROI to enter the best contest, or is that even a thing? Yeah, so when you're building lineups, you're going to use the contest sim, right? So that is you looking at our pre-generated field lineups, and it is taking your lineups that you built, putting them into a contest with the field lineups, and then playing that out 100,000 times and then returning you metrics. When you do the post-contest sim, we are using the actual lineups that were used in the contest, and then we're also using all of the lineups. So one of like the things to remember, important notes here, is that there are 10,000 field lineups that we provide in each of our ownership buckets. If there are more lineups in the contest than that, then we are not representing all of the lineups. So, but in the post-contest sim, we are. So in the post-contest sim, if there are 20,000 lineups, then we are actually looking at all 20,000 as opposed to just the 10,000 that we had in the contest sim. So our team is always trying to scale these things. We went from 5,000 field lineups to 10,000 field lineups. We have the 13 different buckets of ownership for all the different stakes and entry limits. So we're always iterating. We're always trying to improve that and build more field lineups. It is just a process. Buckeye said, I noticed SaberSim runs slower in browsers. Is there a certain PC requirement to look for with it being memory intensive? Honestly, I'm probably not the right person to ask this. I mean, I can tell you that I run it, off my laptop right here, and everything runs fine. I'll tell you a couple things that can hurt performance. Having multiple tabs of SaberSim open can hurt performance. Never closing SaberSim can hurt performance. So like if you are somebody who, has SaberSim open, you just put your computer to sleep and then you come back on and then SaberSim is still open, that can hurt performance. So what I would always suggest is closing it down, shutting off your computer, firing it back up the next day and then opening a new window and then doing that each and every day. So I think that's really important. And then I only like to use 2 tabs around lock when I'm like actually building for both sites or 3 sites, 4 sites, however I'm playing on that day. Indra said, also, if I use a standard subscription, how do I get the most value on it, considering I wouldn't have contest sims? Great question. So what I like to say is that SaberScore is the 80-20 of contest sims. And the reason I say that is because SaberScore was built using contest sims. So the biggest difference between actual contest sims and SaberScore is that when you look at the SaberScore options, these are a little more broad, casting a little bit wider net. So it's small slate, which is like 2 to 5 games. And then it has a range of contest size, 100 to 1K entries. So with contest sims, you're going to know exactly how many entrants are in the contest. You're going to be able to account for the payout structure, and then you're going to be able to account for the stakes, right? So grouping all 100 to 1K entry limits together, you're not accounting for that stakes. But SaberScore was built using contest sims, and then we casted this net appropriately. So it's not as specific, but it is still very good. And I've seen some users independently do some analysis on this on Twitter/X, and they think that SaberScore is still a good option if Ultimate is not in your budget. All right. We are all caught up with questions here, everybody. So appreciate you guys tuning in. Hope you guys have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Enjoy the break here and the weekend. Good luck in all of your football and NBA and NHL contests, whatever you're playing over the weekend here. Just want to remind you guys, if you guys are not signed up with SaberSim, check us out. 5-day free trial in the description. Check us out over the weekend here. So until Monday, guys, take care. Good luck. I'll see you all. Thanks. Bye.